The first book of Moses, Bereshith, chapter 1, first creation by Elohim. In the former time periods, as a powerful sign of working, chief son and heir Elohim filled with choice things, behold, as a sign Shemayim, the place of the names, and behold, as a sign Aratz, the chief place of running. But observe how Aratz was unorganized and empty, and Sheshach rose up from the deep waters, went up to its face, but the Ruach Elohim, as a wall of protection, moved violently upon the surface of the waters. Elohim then declared, light he will exist, and light he will exist. And Elohim gazed upon that beautiful light, and Elohim made distinctive the light from the darkness. And to the light Elohim called out the name Ya'um, and to the darkness he called out the name Leah Laha. This was the close and the dawn of the first age.
The Ketub Abarayath, or the Paleo Hebrew, is a language over 5,000 years old. It chronicles a story branching forth from ancient time. His story, Yahweh. Walk into his story. Read the Paleo Hebrew scriptures.
Shalom, Hebrews and Shebrews. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley, and I am here with our special guest tonight, Andrew Hoy. Thank you for coming on, Andrew. I think this is your second or third time coming on. And before we do just hit the ground running, just make clear, in case you guys didn't see it, in the if you're not sure why you're here tonight, we're here to talk about Andrew's amazing research into the tabernacle in the wilderness, the domed tabernacle. Maybe some of you might want to call it the yurt tabernacle. We're here to discuss that tonight. And a couple weeks ago, I think it was on, Andrew, I think it was on a Sabbath, if I recall, a couple Sabbaths ago, 119 Ministries dropped a video on why they are against the Andrew's research. Now, they specifically mentioned him in the video, dropped his name, kind of stomped on his life's work. And I immediately sent Andrew a email, and I gave the spoiler warning in there. I'm like, okay, a trigger warning for Sabbath, don't read this if you don't, because I can't stand that when people give me bad news on a Sabbath. I'd rather see it afterwards. But anyways, he got back to me later that night, and we were talking, and we wanted to bring 119 Ministries on to do a discussion, a gentlemanly discussion on it, to discuss the difference between a rectangular and a domed or circular shaped tabernacle. And I was within, I think, a day or something like that of writing them and contacting them. I received I think it was a form letter. I don't think they even took the time to actually write me a note. It was just a generic form letter that they would not be coming on. They won't do debates or anything like that. And so here we are. So I invited Andrew on to give his rebuttal, his response, and just show why his research is applicable and true. So welcome, Andrew. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me, Noel. And like I said, we've been, I would call it 2.5 times, because the first time, we were together, we were having tech difficulties, and hopefully we don't get hit with more tonight. I'm noticing some lag with my video. So, hopefully we get past that. But yeah, on the, I guess having this title, what it is, was God's house a rectangle, or his tabernacle a rectangle? That's really kind of in response to that title. In response to that, was God's tabernacle a circle thing? And it wasn't something that they really tested on that video. They kind of went through the motions as if they were testing it, but in about to reduce this volume of work into really it was less than 15 minutes, or right around 15 minutes. Video runs 19, but chop off the ends and the intros and stuff, and you're left with 15 minutes of content. And it was really poorly represented. So it's this is a case of being kind of tried in the court of public opinion. And the public opinion, here's again title slide, which is based on theirs here. So this public opinion problem, it's kind of it's putting me at a tremendous risk in a lot of ways. When I say risk, they've got the big when I say the big microphone and everything. They even put this on their web page. If you look at the two different ministries on YouTube, we've got. They do Tabernacle content. It's all about they have 11 videos in their set. They ran that about 2023, 2024. They were making that. So it was a year ago, and I don't know how much they actually studied my content, but here's again cover sheet of that. But I'm making the argument, bigger isn't always better. It's what's more important is reach. And so, hopefully, with your audience here, Noel, we can have an open and honest discussion without kind of shortcutting things. And I do intend to go over all the content that they have, but they've got 74 times the number of subs that I have. So. But what this is telling me is they're losing ground in their camp and their narrative, because obviously this has got enough attention to really aggravate them, because they're taking a position of orthodoxy. When I say orthodoxy, whether it's Jewish or Christian, they're taking the traditional again Bible art. Was David this young? Probably not, but we get all these images in our heads, and we formulate our thoughts based on them. So so this is just some excerpts out of YouTube's the YouTube comment feed. If you take a look at there's a lot of people here. You're twisting Hoy's take. You're misrepresenting him. You get several of these. And then there's also the other side. People saying, well, you should at least have a conversation with him. Did you reach out to him on that? Because otherwise, I don't think that they would have done what they did as far as that. So. We have this concept of test of 2 or 3 witnesses, right? This is not only Old Testament, rolls back in the New Testament. So one man or one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity, for any sin. In any sin that he sins, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall the matter be established. So. Here's kind of our thing. So I'm obviously doing this in the public sphere, so it makes it a little different from a standpoint of criticizing. And I'm not above and beyond taking public criticism, but what I am not agreeable to is being misrepresented. Is they've really misrepresented my work a lot. So, I'm frankly I was concerned for where they're coming at. So I posted this onto their Facebook. Are you guys sure that this is the path you want to take? I don't think you've done your due diligence, and I don't think it's going to end well. This is, this is something that I've got, really, I feel ironclad, and we'll see. Everyone else, the audience, you guys can formulate your own opinions on it, but. We got the proverb: when you throw mud at other people, you not only get dirty hands, but you also lose ground. So again, I did reach out to them with the hope that they would, kind of reconsider what they'd put out. Again, with a lot of the YouTube comments kind of coming in negative on them as well. We've got this other idea: before you make war against a city, then proclaim peace to it and say, hey. I'm trying to offer truce here. So, that's what I feel I did. We also got the standards on false witness. When you're doing false witness in court, whatever you're trying to prosecute against someone else, that's going to be flipped. That's the way that, the courts were supposed to work. And I think that's the way that courts of heaven will work. So, I did entitle this, or I should say we're calling this 119 questions, and I'm saying this is for 119 Ministries, because I have gone through their entire video, I say several times to the point of exhaustion, to basically develop 119 questions. So again, it's in response to all this misrepresentation. Let me just get at my note here. I'm kind of a little bit addicted to my spreadsheets, and I had to swap computers here. So, one of the questions is, why did they ignore all these public calls? And I'm going to get into playing the videos, but and again, why didn't they want to work towards a peaceable solution? And why did they decide to do this kind of in the court of public opinion? This is, something troubling. So I'm going to go over to the video here and start playing that. Okay.
Hello, and welcome to another teaching from 119 Ministries. Our ministry believes that the whole Bible is true and applicable to our lives today. If you'd like to learn more about what we believe and teach, please visit us at testeverything.net.
So we got a case here. I had to figure out who this was. So my question, why? I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's a new guy. I didn't know who he was either.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of troublesome. So you've got him mentioning my name on video like 7 times, where he just goes by question marks. So you see the 119 tag on him. So this is why I made my one Project 314 name tag here, because I'm more than just a number. This is between my name. I've got my name. I've had this released on. Oops, there we go. I've had this my contact information online for quite some time, so it's not like I'm extremely hard to get a hold of in that. So getting back to this test everything, if you test everything, well, why didn't you test me here? Let's see. So we got the public concerns here that aren't being addressed, but let's see. I'm too scripted here because I've got too many questions, maybe. But I'm gonna play the video a little more, and you see what they've.
If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below. We hope you enjoy studying and testing the following teaching.
So I'm amazed here they've kind of cribbed my my 3D stuff. Again, you see there's really never any credit given on that. We got the ironically the courtyard is distorted in the back. I just wish they would have put this much time into the exegesis as they had put into this. Some of the whiz bang displays. The AV people they're pretty amazing in a lot of ways. So again, why fail to cite copyrighted content is a little bit of a thing there. This question of was God's tabernacle a circle? The title in itself really doesn't make sense because a circle is obviously a 2-dimensional construct. It's more of a theoretical thing. A tabernacle can't be an actual 3D. It's an actual 3D thing, and you're talking about mixing shapes and concepts. We'll get into a lot of that here.
In the book of Exodus, God describes the dimensions of the tabernacle in the wilderness, which is the place where his presence dwelled and the people of Israel came to work.
So doesn't 119 know that the Hebrew Exodus term for worship or holy day is based on actually earlier in the text? Let me bring up my slide here. So if you go all the way back to where Exodus 5 is, we got the first allusion really to this round tabernacle. This let my people go, so that what, so that Yachagu is the Hebrew. We have this idea of celebrating the feast in the wilderness. So what is this feast? What is this word all about? Yachagu comes from Chag, which comes from Chagag. Chagag is to move in a circle, to march in a sacred procession, to observe a festival, by implication be giddy. We've got the Hajj. Everyone's familiar with that, with Mecca. So why don't we go around a cube? Well, because people happen to get trampled to death on that. So if you can imagine Israel doing their festivals in this circular way, this is really what this is a distortion of the proper thing, which is, again, why were they dancing in a circle? Why is the word for feast, Hag? I think I'm ahead of myself in the video again. Okay, so again, this is more than about shapes. This is also about numbers. So I'm bringing up the count here. So we've got the issue of counting the numbers, right? This is just kind of a little excerpt to show you the kind of the level of thought that's gone into some of these models, or kind of the lack thereof. This is out of Exodus 27:16. And for the gate of the court shall be a hanging of 20 cubits of blue, purple, and scarlet, fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. Their pillars shall be 4, their sockets 4. And so what do we see here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hebrew got achad, naim, shalosha, arba, chamesha. So we've got minus the lightning strike. We have five posts. So this is where these criticisms, the quality of the criticisms come from. So again, before we get too carried away with shapes, let's start with numbers. Let's see.
Well, including the count was perfect, because if you want me to pay attention to math, just put the count in there, and then I'm like, oh, I get math. So that's perfect. Perfect for guys like me.
So again, thinking twice on how much we're going to take all these claims at face value. So
Worship him. The plain language of Exodus seems to indicate that both this tabernacle and the courtyard that surrounded it were laid out in a rectangular formation. However, there is a dissident view that has grown in popularity recently, that the tabernacle was laid out in a circular formation instead. In this teaching, we're going to compare this view to the scriptures and see if it has any merit. Before we start, we should explain why this issue is worth examining. Who cares what the shape of the tabernacle was? Why does that matter? There's 2 things we can say in response. First, God commanded his people to construct the tabernacle in a very particular way, so it mattered to him. That alone is enough to make it worth talking about. But second, this issue is significant because it creates questions about the reliability of the Bible.
And that's another falsehood, the idea that this is going to cause issues with the reliability of the Bible. What we're arguing here is translation. So, can 119 tell the difference between, issues of translation or interpretation versus the Bible? I'm not trash talking the Bible. We both have different views on it. So, we both testify to the divine origins of the scriptures. We both believe that they're inspired in Hebrew. So for him to cast it in this light, like I'm trying to take away the Bible. I am trying to bring points to problems about the English Bible. Yes. So that is a really strong distinction there. So, oops.
The scriptures seem to be quite clear that the tabernacle and its courtyard were rectangular. Exodus 26, verses 18 through 22.
Again, some of the key language there seems quite clear. We're talking about opinion in some of this, and a lot of times they're presenting it as fact. So my question, they're going to Exodus 26, 18 through 22, but they're not starting at Exodus 26, 1, and herein lies the problem. Why not go back to where I'm starting to bring some of this content up? And those of you who've seen my slide, obviously you can go back and pause slides, but a lot of this content is that we're talking about is predicated on these earlier texts, which again, they're just in a jump ahead. We'll ignore that thing. So my question again, why does 119, like all the other rectangular frame advocates, assume that the shape of the tent is more important than the shape of arrangements of the fabrics? So they go right into the frames all the time. I've got Ramban commentary. He had zero to say about the curtains. So when you skip it, you got here a little, there a little. Everything is kind of metered out in that regard. Let's see here. Next slide. So we've also got some Hebrew nuance as far as these slides or these words side. So this idea that make 20 frames on the south side, and for the second side of the tabernacle, the north side. But here we got a different, making mention of the rear. So if we got Hebrew experts here that we're listening to, critiquing my content on, it's like, well, what about these words? Because the Hebrew words, they're using multiple words for side. Why doesn't 119 take that into consideration? A rectangle is it's a four-sided figure. And what are we being what were we described here? We're only described two sides, and arguably a third, again, based on what word means side. There's one Hebrew word here that means side, and then the rest of them have deeper meanings. And so you can't just skip those over. We got rectangle here again. It's a four-sided structure, and so they're making argument for this whole through this whole video that, hey, this is a four-sided, this is a four-sided plane thing, which is again a rectangle. So the tabernacle, even if it was rectangular, it could not be a rectangle. And again, they're trying to take some of these things out of context. So here we've got, again, Hebrew describing four, do we have it describing four sides? Because, here we've got, a word that's translated as edge. Here, angle wall, which is kind of an interesting here, and here it's flanks. And so, these are the some of the nuances that they're just skipping. Oops. So again, we get the counting effect. We got how many sides? 1, 2, and 3. We got 20 beams on the north, 20 on the south, and maybe west of 6. So are we describing a triangle here? Are we describing a trapezoid? What's going on? The assumption, it's all about assumption. So, does the tabernacle plan really have four sides? Oops. And keep playing here.
You shall make the frames for the tabernacle, 20 frames for the south side, and 40 bases of silver you shall make under the 20 frames, 2 bases under one frame for its 2 tenons, and 2 bases under the next frame for its 2 tenons. And for the second side of the tabernacle, on the north side, 20 frames, and their 40 bases of silver, 2 bases under one frame and 2 bases under the next frame. And for the rear of the tabernacle westward, you shall make 6 frames. Exodus 27, verse 18. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, the breadth 50, and the height 5 cubits, with hangings of fine twined linen and bases of bronze.
Okay, so again, how does 119 even know the court here is even quadrilateral, right? Again, quadrilateral having 4 sides. Here there's mention of an overall length and an overall width. They're basically jumping ahead again on all the other text that was before it and just coming up with again, foregone conclusion. Okay, so I'm basically asking people to think outside the box here. We have a compass. A compass. How many sides does the compass have? Well, you could say it's got different number of cardinal points. We got 4 cardinal points of the compass. But here we're talking. We're told about something to the north side and the south side, and then arguably something west in the rear. So this is all we've been told so far. And again, the assumption that everything is aligned in this north and south is, again, they're getting ahead of themselves, and so that is a problem. Let me play on here.
In fact, literally every Bible translation depicts the tabernacle as a rectangular structure.
So this text here, as he's saying it, every Bible translation depicts it as a rectangular structure. Every single one of these verses is talking about the courtyard. So again, this is more, I don't know if he doesn't have the language, being able to specify well enough. But he's trying to blend together 2 things and 2 ideas. There's the tabernacle in the center, and then the courtyard around the exterior. And so he's basically saying, again, because all these are saying, the length is 100 and the width is 50, that's a rectangle, that's a rectangle, that's a rectangle. No matter how many times you say it, it's like, does saying it more make it more true? So my question too, why did he go out of the way to favor translators that neglect the other, the 50 detail altogether? Oops. And there. Okay, so again, these are different shapes that can be that are 4-sided, and again, we get no mention of 4 sides yet, at least in his presentation. So again, how do we know the arrangements of these 4 different sides? And then this other case that he's showing is like the undeniable proof. We've got Exodus 28:18a, so he truncates the latter half of this, but you can see every place where I've got it highlighted, and it's breadth 50 everywhere. Okay, so we say 50 everywhere. This idea of chamashim b'chamashim is 50 in 50. Okay, so a lot of the translators just dump it out. He's using an ESV. Well, an ESV is it talks about and the breadth 50. What you don't see is any mention of the second 50. And so again, he's making such a strong case for, this is a rectangle. There's only one translation that he cited here is that mentioned the 50 by 50, right? And this is Young's literal translation, because they're actually bringing out this detail. When I was in Israel in touring Shiloh, ancient Shiloh, talked to the tour guide, and the tour guide, he's a native Hebrew speaker, and he's like, he says to the other guy, Mazeh, chamashim b'chamashim, because he's asking his friend, what's this, 50 and 50? Because he didn't understand it. Okay, so this is one of these details. You just sweep it under the rug. Can we do that here if we're gonna talk about the getting into the real meaning of what the Hebrew is saying? I think not. So, why is this 50 and 50 or 50 by 50 possibly? Why do they omit it in the other direction? So, they're using it in this capacity like it's enveloping, make it everywhere that way or throughout or at the other end. well, if this is just a pure rectangular structure, well, why aren't they going to say, chamesh b'chamesh and amah b'amah? This is what they would do if they're giving 3 dimensions, an X, Y, and Z direction. This is what you'd expect if this is giving an overall enveloping side. So again, I'm listing the Youngs up here, breadth 50 by 50, breadth 50 by 50, 50 by 50. You can see all the literal translations pop it out that way. So what are we talking about? Are we talking, and this is, again, it's 5 cubits high. So are we talking about a box that's somehow elevated, floated over? There's sometimes where people will say 2 width directions. Something is 100 long, by this, by that, 2 by 4, a 4 by 4. It's a board that's 96 inches long and it's 4 by 4, right? So this is the kind of language that it's using here. But again, they're overlooking it and they're just jumping right to the conclusion.
So if the tabernacle was really a circle, then every single English translation, both Jewish and Christian, has gotten it wrong, which raises some serious questions about the credibility of those English translations.
So he says that all the translations getting it wrong. Again, a lot of times this is more about interpretation than translation. I'm not complaining about using the word length and width, which is kind of where he's going or suggesting that I'm doing. Let's see it. Another slide here. Okay, so here we got the case of the courtyard. If it's, I put in a potato, just to show like any possible dimension here, or any possible shape. It can still have a width. It can still have a length. Here we've got, again, on the circle, we got something with 100 long. It's got a width of 50 by 50. And again, this doesn't seem to account for it in the rectangle world.
On the other hand, if the translators got it right, then that raises questions about the people who claim that the tabernacle was a circle. If they can't get that simple detail right, then people will likely question their credibility when it comes to very serious matters like sin, repentance, and salvation. This would harm their witness as representatives of God's word.
So here he brings up, I think, a very powerful point. And I think it's kind of funny, as far as talking in terms of credibility, where they're going with this. So this comes right off of their website. Their website, the About Us and the history. It says, as it relates to our credibility, we readily admit that we have none. Okay, so how is it that you're saying that you have no credibility, and then being all concerned about the credibility of us as witnesses? And, they say we simply study His word and teach what we believe to be truth. Well, I get that, but it is our desire to receive no attention or notoriety. Well, I think what they're trying to say is they have no credential, which is different than credibility. Credibility is the quality of being trusted or believed in. So here they are admitting it's like, well, we have no credibility. Well, this is why you have no credibility. If you're making claims, you can't prove the count and all that. And again, you don't reach out. So let's see on the rectangle here.
There's a lot going on. I almost think subconsciously too. I mean, I've been taking notes here. Maybe towards the end of it, we can even attack the elephant or address the elephant in the room as to what I think is really going on. But anyways, I'm not talking much because I'm just really taken with everything you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm kind of like when I say drinking from a fire hose or kind of delivering from a fire hose, because all this has been rattling around. I feel bad that this has been a bit unrehearsed because, kind of pressed for time and deadline here to try to put something out, especially before, the Parsha comes up, which is Teruma, which is on Saturday. So, it's definitely not as polished as I'd like it to be. And kind of going through the question list here, it's just like, okay, well, this is It looked like it was about 35 minutes or so as far as all the content that I recorded here, but it's a little hard on the bouncing back and forth, and I usually do better speaking extemporaneously but I was trying to really, match question for question here, or not question for question, but they're making all the statements, and so I'm questioning a lot of their statements, and some of it's a lot of it's in the slide presentation, but some of it's in my notes here. So again, I apologize for being a little rough around the edges here on my presentation. So.
Seem like a trivial thing, this isn't an issue that we want to get wrong, and certainly not something that we want to spread around if it's false.
So he's kind of resorting to fear-mongering, tactics here, kind of saying, oh, you don't want to be spreading that around if you don't really know everything, and so they're trying to really kind of suppress the messages as far as I can see here.
It's worth checking into to see if it has any merit. So what do proponents of this theory say when they're confronted with the fact that every Bible translation says that the tabernacle was a rectangle?
So he's talking about the hypothetical. What would they say? And this is why I had these slides in there. Have you had a conversation with him? So he's presenting this hypothetical as if it's something real. And it's not. It's something that I've been denied the opportunity to answer all this. So he just also said that everywhere that the tabernacle, it says it's a rectangle. Well, this is a Bible Gateway search results, and if you type in the word rectangle, we got all of three. I'm sorry. We actually have 0 results. But we have 3 results of rectangle for rectangular, right? So you see in rectangular, we got 1 Kings 7:5, Ezekiel 41. We have nothing in the world of Exodus. We have also square, 55 accounts for square, 207 for line, so we got length at 119, ironically, and circle it even at 17. But he's basically saying throughout this presentation, like a propagandist, the tabernacle or the Exodus says it's a rectangle. Exodus says it's a rectangle. No, that's simply not true. The translators could have used rectangle, but that wasn't in the original. When I say base language, it's again, how do we define the rectangle?
So it sounds like what you're saying is that he had such preconceived notions that in his mind, he just thought the rectangle had to be there. And how could anyone deny that? If I'm hearing that right? And you're not finding it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, so, again, getting into
That's
rectangle, what is a rectangle we need, to go back to this level of schooling, we're really going back to what, first and second grade on shapes. Rectangles have 4 straight lines. They all have parallel sides. They have right angle corners. You don't use those words right angle corners, but you get kids that young being able to point out what a rectangle is. Well, when you get a little older and into your geometry classes, you start understanding what a right angle is, but you understand the tests for what we would call a rectangle as far as the shape. So yeah, it's something that. So I'm asking, can you guys identify which Bible translations say that the tabernacle is a rectangle? Because again, the search results point at 0 here.
And just, and not checking this up for, yourself, if you were just to go watch their video, you would believe it when he says that, they're all the translators are identifying it as rectangular. And, how could they all be wrong? And turns out that's not the case at all.
Yep. That whole you got a mixture of normalcy bias. We've got this argument from authority. All these things that are logically, not, they don't stand up in a court of law as far as laws of logic, laws of argument, etc. So.
Well, Andrew Hoy, the man who came up with the circular tabernacle idea, says that translators, quote, give preference to their preconceived notions while translating the Hebrew.
Okay, so that, as far as testing all things here,
by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. He actually proved that point, that he actually is attacking this idea that anyone would say someone would go with their preconceived notions, and he actually is in this video. I think we've established that point, that he's projecting this idea that he actually does. So anyways, go ahead.
Absolutely. So getting into this quoting and misquoting here. So I'm saying, after all, it is bad engineering practice to force a proverbial square peg into a round hole. Yet that is exactly what theologians do when they give preference to their preconceived notions translating Hebrew. So the way he's spinning this, and he actually includes a link to this. He's counting on the fact that nobody's going to read it. But I said that, all translators are lazy and give preference to their preconceived notions. And I'm saying, no, this is a conditional thing. So he can't even, be honest and reproducing some of the basic statements that I've made here. So, this is why this sort of stuff is just it's frustrating to deal with, again, because they've got this audience 74 times bigger than mine, and they just say whatever they want. And boom, it must be true. He speaks with such a nice tone and demeanor, he sounds so simple to listen to, and he sounds so smart, right? Well, we'll test what he knows here.
Basically, he claims that the English translators were lazy and relied on tradition rather than carefully parsing through the Hebrew text that describes the tabernacle.
Okay, so we have a little bit more on the quotation thing. So I have another excerpt here. This is from a Facebook post. I don't know if he got it, but it's a rectangle dummy was my my joke, because there's a lot of different ways that they arrange the courtyard, in the rectangular system here. So I basically said those lost in tradition and translation are completely unable to see other directions in sacred Bible texts, like the Hebrew reference to clockwise and around, which again, he doesn't do so much in this video here. He does it just a little bit at the end, but you'll see how lacking that is. And all the more they are too lazy, inept, or just too indifferent to do or to count the posts or do the math as they read the larger description. So let's get back to our counting the posts again. So I'm making the claim that these people are lazy. Sometimes they are. A lot of people don't want to look it up. Here we've got Exodus 27:10, and the 20 pillars thereof and the 20 sockets shall be brass. The hooks of the pillars, their fillets shall be silver. But we have 20. I should have been 27:9. Make the court of the tabernacle south side southward. There'll be hangings of the court. 100 long on one side. So here we got the 100 long on one side, and there's not 20 posts. There's 20. I'm sorry. There's not 20 posts. There's 21. It's like, well, that doesn't matter, because it's a rectangle, right? And this is where they go with all this. It's as ridiculous as it is exhausting there. So,
well, let's test that claim by looking at the Hebrew text that describes the tabernacle. Specifically, let's look at the verse we've been citing that describes the courtyard. Exodus 27, verse 18. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, the breadth 50, and the height 5 cubits, with hangings of fine twined linen and bases of bronze. Earlier in Exodus chapter 27, we're told that the south and north sides of this courtyard were 100 cubits long, while the west and east sides were 50 cubits broad.
Okay, again, he's still missing this 50 by 50 as he's putting this out. So he's calling it the biblical model. I'm saying no, this is 119's model, because again, this Young's literal translation, they're missing that, and they're missing that in the Hebrew. So where did these missing 50 cubits go? And here, why again, not a length of 100 by 100. He's got two sides shown with two measurements, and that's supposed to be some sort of evidence for us.
On the surface, it sure sounds like this is describing a rectangle with 4 sides, whose dimensions are 100 cubits by 50 cubits. However, Hoy claims that the Hebrew says otherwise. He says, quote, the dimensions for the courtyard are described as being exactly 100 cubits long that is diameter, with the north and south portions each measuring 50 cubits wide, that is radius. So, according to Hoy, the 100 cubits is not the length of a rectangle, but the diameter of a circle.
And again, I never said it's not the length of a rectangle, or it couldn't be the length of a rectangle. It can be in some cases, but this is a case of locale and understanding what that length and width are.
And the 50 cubits is not the width of a rectangle, but the radius of a circle, which is naturally half of its diameter.
So again, he's using language like you either say length or you say diameter. You either say width or you say radius, and that's just again more logical fallacy here. So he has this listed as my model, and I say no because why would 119 exclude the 3/14 circumference while depicting my model? This is again a big part of this understanding. And here's this diagram I showed before. Again, you guys can pause that and grind that out. But this really starts in Exodus 26, verse 7 through 13.
So what does the Hebrew in this verse say? This verse uses two key Hebrew terms. One is orech, which is translated length, but which Hoy claims should instead be translated diameter.
Okay, here's again some of the subtle half-truths that are being made on all this. Is just again I think along the lines of exhausting. Well, first of all, let's look at what word we're talking. We said Hoy claims it should be translated as diameter. And this is not true. I'm basically saying that it can refer to a diameter because it is a length. Again, a length is a diameter. Not all lengths are diameters, but all diameters are indeed lengths, like it or not. He happened to quote a verb here, which is H748, orech being in verb form. Again, this is the idea of to be long is the verb, and again you got Hebrew verb and noun in a relationship where the verb is always the action verb is always the strongest idea in the scheme of things there as far as understanding what the noun's all about, because something is what it does and vice versa. So Hoy claims translators map orech for length to 753. So if you take a look at Exodus 27:18, what do they map it to? H753, the length of the court. So I've never said that word should be changed. I've never said, change that word for length and make it diameter, across the board. But this is where he goes. This is, again, I think it's along the lines of libel or slander, or a combination thereof, as he's giving it both in spoken as well as in written form here. So what is 119? 119 claims H748 refers exclusively to rectangular length. 119 mismatches numbers improperly, improperly correlates parts of speech. So I say that orech refers to both distance and time, and diameter happens to be a distance. So if you take a look at the word diameter, this is just basic, Googling, Merriam-Webster type stuff here. Diameter, straight line segment that passes through the center of a circle or sphere from one side to the other. The length of such a line segment. Here also we've got defined the length of such a line, the width of such a line. So he's kind of quoting me out of here, where I'm just saying that in later Exodus text, the same sheets are hung from metal frames in order to create the courtyard, which again, he doesn't mention any of this. Not surprisingly, the dimensions for the courtyard are described as being exactly 100 cubits long, i.e. diameter. In this case, again, I'm trying to explain something to someone. I'm not trying to tell them how to retranslate anything. And with the north and south portions measuring 50 cubits wide, and or radius. So I've also said saying length is i.e. circumference here. So why doesn't he just assume that I'm saying that length is always circumference, which again I'm not saying. Let me just see if I right slide here. So again, why doesn't 119 show their audience the meaning of these words? He goes right into saying what these words mean in Hebrew. He quotes a verb instead of the noun that's associated, and then he misses all the other depths that are being described here. So take a look here: length of physical length or of time. So the fact that these two things are interrelated. We have orech. Well, what is orech? We get the English word, what? Arch. It sounds an awful lot like arch and arc, right? So you got the A, the R, and the K sound, right? Arak. So my question, we have something that's relating to luminaries, because you get into the length of a day. What does that have in common with the length of a distance? You can see the sun move in the sky a certain distance. You see the sundial. There's something that spans and spreads. So again, this whole idea that that it has to be, it's for a length, and it's for a length of a rectangle exclusively. He's having you ignore all of this content. This is something he just doesn't even bring up, which I think is curious anyway. But so again, why not? Why doesn't 119 teach their audience? I know, Noel, you got Pamela working with her. Getting into the ancient side of the language, so in order to just instead of telling people what these meanings are, we have the idea of the sounds, the phonics. How do the phonics come through to modern day? And this is really the idea of Edenics. What words do we form out of arch? We get architecture, archery, archives, archaeology, architects, archangel, all these things which are related to either a measure of time or a measure of distance. And so again, I'm not saying that this is I actually do have an article on the Tabernacle being basically a divine timepiece as well. So I think it was used in conjunction with calendars, which stands to reason, because you have it's called the Ohel Moed, and it's tied into the Moedim really. So anyway.
The other is rochav, which is translated breadth, but which Hoy claims should instead be translated radius. So the question is, how should these words be translated in Exodus 27, verse 18? Should they be length and width, or should they be diameter and radius?
Okay, so again, we're getting kind of nailed with this false choice. Either you have to translate it as diameter and radius, or you have to translate it in length and width. And this is not where I'm going. This is again misrepresentative here. So Hoy claims that it can be or can refer to at radius, but guess what? He did again. He referred to the verbs instead of the nouns. The verb having to do with to be or grow wide, to grow large. We have the part of speech, verb, right here. Well, what do we have here? H7341. Well, he's quoted 7337. Again, I'm happy he did it, because ironically, it helps shed light on the meaning of what Rochav really is all about. So thank you for doing that, Mr. 119. Here again, this is, I think, libel or slander, the say that I'm saying that you should translate all those that way. Here is the H7341, breadth, width, expanse. Okay, so it's not limited to say the length of a rectangle per se. So is Rochav only used for describing rectangles? Again, we have the privilege of seeing the verb, to be or grow wide. We have the reference to a broad place. We have a reference to a street or an avenue. And so again, this is the only meaning that 119 says this thing can have. So, why, what's up with that? So I'm sorry, I'm not phrasing all these things as questions, because I do have them all phrased as questions in my notes, but it's a little bit tedious for me to try to get at that when I've got a lot of content on the slides. So how does this work in the round model? On the width, the idea of rochav, and this is where, again, we can get Pamela will probably be grinning ear to ear seeing the idea of width being kind of called out. So rachav, resh, chet, bet. We have the idea of head, a wall, and a tent. Well, this happens to be referred to as the head, the center of the tabernacle. You can see it. It's actually written not only in Paleo, but it's existing in the literal Hebrew text, which, again, I dare say that they have not taken a look at. The wall, this is a tent wall. The chet is actually representative of a tent wall, and or I should say a wall, period. And the bet having to do with a tent. And so we've got this idea that the rachav is from the head to the width of the tent. And we see this kind of being used in capacity of roads and so forth. Let's see, back to...
Let's take a look at the other places that these terms are used and see if there's any reason to translate them one way or the other.
So this is kind of maddening. He goes over like 7.5 minutes on some of this, and we're going to be able to go through some of this a little faster, hopefully. But getting into, I should have stuck on my PowerPoint here. So again, this is what they're saying. In effect, they're saying that this is always a rectangle when there's someone's measuring the length and the width. Well, how about measuring something that's not perfectly rectangular? Well, 119 would say this is always a rectangle too. This is always a rectangle, a football, or again a potato. He's creating a world in which we can't measure anything but rectangles. Because we have the length and the width specced out all the time, all sorts of cases in the Bible, and he's making the case, no, it's singularly rectangle, and we're going to show that false as well. So how do you deal with things with rounded corners and the like? And this is kind of where he's taking us with his Ark of the Covenant, which here is at
Exodus 25, verse 10.
So he's bringing this up. Again, they go on 7 minutes of giving different examples rather than giving the actual definition, rather than looking at the core, the basis for the etymology. Just okay, I'm gonna cherry pick definitions and give you more cases of confirmation bias to prove the point.
Yeah, in fact, this right here, when I watched this video, as soon as he went into the Ark of the Covenant, I'm like, there's the sticking point right here. This is where they're going to reel their audience in preconceived notions, because most of the people watching this 119 are going to go, yeah, there's no possible way the Ark of the Covenant is, round shaped, circular. And yeah.
When I haven't even asserted that, it's like I don't deal with the holy furnishings. I'm like fixing, when I say focusing on the tabernacle, because that's part of it. It's like, well, that's a big enough hill to climb. So no need to upset the Indiana Jones fans, so to speak. But when we have, so he's saying that everything is rectangular. So what point does something cease to be rectangular? Okay, because we got rounded corners here. Can we no longer call this a rectangle? Is it kind of a rectangle? Because look at this, what the ark is. These wonderful things, they look like spools that you would have turned in your furniture back from the 60s and 70s, right? We've got a lid. Well, the lip of that lid seems to be bigger, and so he's making the case here that that length and width, again, we have to be rectangle. Let me go back and play this a little further.
They shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, orech, a cubit and a half its breadth, rochav, and a cubit and a half its height. Here we have the terms orech and rochav being used to describe the dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. These same words are then used to describe the cover that was placed on top of the ark. Exodus 25, verse 17. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, orech, and a cubit and a half its breadth, rochav. In these verses, the words orech and rochav must be referring to the dimensions of a rectangle.
So again, if this is a rectangle, look at the box. Are we measuring from this outer vertical spool piece on there? Is that part of the corner? Because guess what? These corners are protruding even more. Or how about this ring? Are you measuring from the ring? What it looks like is the cover is depicted longer than the bottom piece, but the base is depicted wider where the rings are. So you have all these, again, all this artistic imagery, it hits people's brains and they link onto it. We remember things that we see, but we don't ask the question, well, where's the reference point for this measurement? Another thing that's saying mercy seat, that translation is just ridiculous, because you have mercy, we have chen and chesed and racham, and here we have getting into words for mercy. You'll never find that with the seat. Not to say that God's not merciful, but this whole idea that they call it a mercy seat. It's just another great nickname. Guess what? Like the Ark of the Covenant is, right? Because it's never called an ark, because this word Ark of the Covenant, is from this orech term that he's talking about in detail. Never seems to mention that we'll call this Ark of the Covenant the Aron, which is what the Hebrew calls it. So again, just a lot of missed things. So he's talking about how let me get to them, jumping ahead on the slide here.
If we were to translate these words as diameter and radius, as Hoy does in Exodus 27, verse 18,
which is not true,
then we would have a spherical Ark of the Covenant with a spherical cover on top of it, which would be absurd.
I actually went back and searched through my whole book, the House of El Shaddai book, right? I'm like, well, maybe I did say that. Maybe it was, I didn't phrase it right. And I've only found 2 references to me talking about translate, and they're not dealing with retranslating these words. Okay, so maybe I had said something unclean off the cuff at some point. I can't say that I didn't. If they want to, fish that up through the archives and bring it to public light, I'll apologize, because this is just misrepresentative again. So
This is, by the way, this is where I think in their video they go full on ridiculous, where they're trying to make like the table of showbread and everything out to be this big old like circular thing that like you can't hold plates on and stuff, and that's like anyways, I'm gonna shut up unless you talk.
No, thank you. Yes, it's a good point. It's not too far off in the point. But here they go through this majestic introduction, showing my CGI Tabernacle artwork, which I hired out, and then part of it I did myself then, and put time and effort. And they take that, no permission, no copyright. They're manipulating it like better than I can right now. If I would have done what they did, it would have taken me a month. Maybe not with AI, I don't know, but it would take me a long time. So they put all this effort in there, and now we've got this drawing with with simplest shapes possible, and he can't even put in spheres for us, and so I added the spheres here, because what he's showing here, it's like, well, it looks like 2 colliding discs. How does one visualize that? And at first I'm like looking at that, I'm like, what is he trying to convey there? So he's went from saying Hoy says it's a circle to, well, Hoy says also it's a sphere or 2 spheres. And
the irony in this too, I don't want to give away that, talk about the elephant in the room yet, but just the sheer irony in this video is beyond cringe. But yeah.
Okay, back to the video here.
But that's just one example. So let's keep looking. We also see the words orech and rochav used to describe the table of showbread.
Here we go.
Verse 23.
Which I'm not talking about either.
Table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, orech, a cubit its breadth, rochav, and a cubit and a half its height. It would be rather difficult to balance 12 loaves of bread on top of a spherical table, so it seems sensible to say that this was a rectangular item as well. And again, it's described using the same Hebrew words for length and width that are used to describe the courtyard. Next, we see these words used to describe the curtains that covered the tabernacle. Exodus
Which
26, verses 1 and 2. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet yarns. You shall make them with cherubim skillfully worked into them. The length, orech, of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth, rochav, of each curtain 4 cubits. All the curtains shall be the same size. Exodus 27, verses 7 and 8. You shall also make curtains of goat's hair for a tent over the tabernacle. 11 curtains shall you make. The length, orech, of each curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth, rochav, of each curtain 4 cubits.
And this is all the more ironic because I'm basically saying, yeah, you start with these rectangular swatches, right? And you know, this is something I'm not remotely trying to say that these things are some other shape. You know, that's again patently absurd, ridiculous. So you know, why would they go down this kind of a tangent like this? And well, I'm just I need to stop rambling like that. But what do I have for a slide here? Okay, we're a little ways from that. But you know, they don't get into like, you know, like loom weaving. You know, how do you do loom weaving? You know, going end to end and things like that. You know, so this whole these constructs of like you know, what is being represented and what I'm saying, you know, they're just going so far in left field, and they're dragging all their people with it, thinking that these are my thoughts. And it's like, well, in some cases he's not actually saying that, but that's the kind of rabbit trails that, you know, that he's leading people off onto. So
the 11 curtains shall be the same size. It's clear that these curtains were large rectangular strips, not circles or ovals.
So again, why would they imply that they're ovals? And I never said anything like that. So I guess the question I have for them is like, well, why aren't you showing these connected, you know, at the right edges? Because if you understand how loom weaving works, you know, you're taking a long patch of fabric, you're stretching it out. Or when I say you're bringing strings back and forth, and then you weave in and out, back and forth. You know, so you're kind of making this lattice. So at the end of it, you're cutting the ends off, and so you know it's talking about joining these curtains at the cut edges. And again, he doesn't show that. In this diagram here, you've got all these. It looks like stitches, but if you count them up, you're going to get way more than 50, because it talks about using 50 loops. You know, this is again more of these details. It's like, oh, yawn. You know, I'm not going to read that. I get that. It's for some people, this is, you know, I never was interested in this until I made the discovery. And part of the reason I was never interested in it is because this thing looks so ridiculous that who's going to say, oh, wow, I serve a God who, again, lives in a box. It's the Jack in the Box model is you know, kind of the thing. So let me back it up just a second here. So we make these pretty highly artistic things and intricate works, right? And then we're dragging the back corners in the sand. All right. Does that make a whole lot of sense? It's all sagging over the roof. And then what else do we got going on here? We got it all bunched up in the corners. We've got the corners, you know, kind of wanting to poke through. If you ever pull a fabric over a corner, you pull that tightly, you know, guess what it does? You know, eventually it tears. So again, stressed at the corners. And then we have all this pretty artwork. And what are you going to do with that? Well, we're going to cover it up. So only one of the 6 sides of this would be visible in theory. And so why would you make all this pretty stuff only to cover it up with a heap of white?
Rectangular strips.
So there it's covered up with a heap of white, right?
circles, or ovals.
And we also got these brass tacks that join it together. We got a set of 5 and a set of 6. I got to back up. Sorry again.
Size, circles, or not here that these curtains were large rectangular.
Okay, so not only do we have the bunch up, but it says to take a set of 5, a set of 6, and fold over the last curtain that at the end of the line, more or less. And guess what we have here? Well, this is unfolded, and again we got these copper things stitching the two halves together. It's like, why does that make any sense to do that? What structural benefit? What fabrication benefit? What symbolic benefit? If you want it, because they always go to symbolism, right? Because that becomes the answer to all these mysteries and the questions. Oh, he's told us to build it that way, and so it's sacred and symbolic. And it's like, well, yeah, but it also has purpose, because he doesn't have us run around in life doing purposeless things. Oh.
Strips, not circles or ovals. And again, the words used to describe their dimensions are the same words used to describe the
And so here we got everything staked down. I was talking about how this is getting all covered up, right? So you can see the white is overcome this other color. It's also staked down very heavy and pulling it to the back. Interestingly enough, why are we not given dimensions for these 2 layers of leather? We got the reddened leather, and then the upper leather is kind of the way that the text refers to these as. So with this being the upper, then this is the lower. Another textual non-conformance they've got is this second layer that they have on there. It's not supposed to go over the top. It says to go over the sides. Tzadi is the Hebrew there. And oops, I guess we don't have to pay attention to that, because they put it over the top. And so they're all, rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. Well, you got no knowledge base of the rest of this stuff here. So
dimensions of the courtyard. We further see these words used to describe the wooden frames that formed the skeleton of the temple.
Okay, wooden frames. So he says wooden frames, and I think part of the reason he's saying wooden frames is because this is what this version, the CGI version, is depicting. But what do we have here? It looks like there's seams or joints at all these different places. So if there's 20 frames, well, we've increased that to, if you count all these out, it turns into like 46, which is like, all right. So apparently the frame is they're saying it's only
Used to
let's see
describe the dimensions of the courtyard.
just bringing this back here. Okay, so we got these little nubs. What Bible verse does that say? He's saying this. It's talking about the length and the width of these. Are you including these little nubs that they're adding in? Because the Bible doesn't talk about these little nubs. This is a minority opinion that they're making frames. The Strong's term there again is referring to like a beam, like you would use in shipbuilding, or a board or a plank. Walking the plank matey. It's not talking about this hollow thing, which incidentally, he's fixated on dimensions. Well, he says the length and the width. Okay, so the length and the width here, this is a measure of 10 cubits tall or long. And again, that language, it could actually say tall, but it doesn't. It says that they're 10 cubits long. So he's putting them up, linear. And it's like, well, I'm not taking objection to that, because he's saying that they're 10 cubits in rise or length instead of rise, because the length can become the rise, because again, it's a unit of measure. But then it says it make them 10 by 1 by 1/2, and this is another width problem. So traditionally, the rectangular models, they don't know how thick these pieces are. It's like, well, if you're going to build something, if I say, hey, Noel, go to Home Depot for me and pick up some boards, will you? What size boards do you want? Well, I want them to be 10 foot long. How thick? Well, 2 inches. Okay, well, how wide? I don't know. Whatever you want. I mean, it doesn't work that way. You're going to get a 2 by 1, a 2 by 4, a 2 by 6, a 2 by 8. All these different sizes. And so the traditional people are always translating this as if it's a two-dimensional board, which I guess goes right in line with his thinking. It's like, oh, this piece is a rectangle, right? This is not a rectangle. This is a cuboid or a prism. A rectangular prism is the geometric term. I'm not saying that the Bible should use those terms, but anyway, you get the point.
Further see these words used to describe the wooden frames that formed the skeleton of the tabernacle. Exodus 26, verses 15 and 16.
So they got little stubs on the bottom of those too. You can see these little stubby feet. And, how do those things help hold it up? So we get into some of the various structural aspects of it, or what keeps this whole thing from wanting to cave inward. Here we've got, you're tensioning something and you're going to want to push it in. What's keeping these walls from collapsing inward? And I tell you what they've got on their model here, they added an extra piece, going across this way that's not called out in the Bible. That's one of these little details that, also eats away at the credibility of what they've got going here, because they're so bent on calling it a rectangle, they'll do anything to get it to conform to that description.
The dimensions of the courtyard. We further see these words used to describe the wooden frames that formed the skeleton of the tabernacle. Exodus 26, verses 15 and 16. You shall make upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood. 10 cubits shall be the length, orech, of a frame, and a cubit and a half the breadth, rochav, of each frame.
So again, our two-dimensional board here. I thought I had a slide for that. I'm sorry. Hopefully, let's see. I'll just bring up ISA while I'm at it. But hopefully, you guys can envision what what it's like to build with a board with only two directions, two dimensions. Here we go. Old Testament, Exodus 26. 15. For those of you guys who don't have this program, it's ISA, Interlinear Scripture Analyzer. It's excellent. It's a freebie, so please download it and tip the people who put it together, because it's a wonderful tool. So here we have Exodus 26:16. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a half shall be the breadth of one board. Right. So now we've only got two dimensions, but it's basically saying and the board cubit and half the cubit width. So we've got two width dimensions that are being given there, but they're saying, well, no, this is just a two-dimensional board. Again, how does that work, guys? Bring this back here. There we go.
These wooden frames, once again, were clearly rectangular, not circular. Finally, we see the words orech and rochav used to describe the dimensions of the altar of sacrifice and the altar of incense, which are specifically said to be squares. Exodus 27, verse 1. You shall make the altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long, orech, and 5 cubits broad, rochav. The altar shall be square, and its height shall be 3 cubits. Exodus 30, verses 1 and 2. You shall make an altar on which to burn incense. You shall make it of acacia wood. A cubit shall be its length, orech, and a cubit its breadth, rochav. It shall be square, and 2 cubits shall be its height. Its horns shall be of one piece with it. So, every rectangular item in the tabernacle is described using the terms orech and rochav, the same words that describe the length and width of the courtyard.
So this is a lot of circular reasoning, right? So why are they using all this circular reasoning? Saying, well, because it's rectangular, because this thing's rectangular, this is also too. That's like saying if a basketball is a sphere and a basketball is orange, and the fruit we call orange is also a sphere, well, that must mean basketballs taste delicious. This is the path of thought, or like, well, Tuesday is Taco Tuesday. Well, it must be Taco Tuesday everywhere, because I can get tacos for half price on Tuesdays at this one place. we're extrapolating, and we're also limiting the language, the way that they're trying to force everyone into using it.
In the context of the tabernacle, these words are always used to describe the length and width of a rectangle, and never used to describe the diameter and radius of a circle. But that's not all. As it turns out, these Hebrew words describe the dimensions of a rectangle every place in Scripture that they're used.
Every place, regardless.
They're used to describe Noah's Ark.
So here's my Noah's Ark slide again. Okay, so if Noah's Ark is described this way, all the Noah's Ark models have curved corners. All ships usually have curved corners. Again, the word for the border, the plank, is the same word they use in shipbuilding. And so guess what they're doing? They're bending some of these pieces. Usually you do not see an arc that is just two-dimensional. So where are we measuring from, and why doesn't he apply the same standard to the height, right? How could we have this cutesy little barn house on top of the ark if, in fact, if we're expecting basically a cuboid? So I'm making a 119 meme here for them. I'm quoting him directly here. As it turns out, these Hebrew words, orech and rochav, describe the dimensions of a rectangle every place in Scripture that they're used, regardless of the context. They're used to describe Noah's Ark. So again, should we expect right angle corners? This is 2 Mark 11:06, and it's for John 4:119. So anyway, should we expect right angle corners on Noah's Ark? These are 14 giraffes. I don't know what the height of a giraffe is, but are we going to make them? I made them Minecraft models to, help with their comfort level of meeting their expectations on shapes and lines and dimensions here. So
I like that you had 14 giraffe, being that they're clean animals. So
right. And you'll never find drawings like that, so thank you. I'm back up to that, because it says in Genesis 7 that you should take two pair of all the clean animals. Giraffe is a clean animal. The rabbis say, well, they're clean, but we can't eat them because we can't do a kosher slaughter right because we can't reach the neck or something like that. But
get a ladder.
Yeah. So or they couldn't do proper draining on them or whatever. But they're like a cow with a long neck essentially. But it talks about how all the clean animals that you're bringing on, 2 pairs or 7 pairs of 7 sets of pairs, and you got these animals. Well, they got a different breeding cycle. They don't have litters. Cats and dogs have litters where they get scads of them. These things are bearing calves, and you're much slower reproduction rate. So, this is our friends in Kentucky too. The Answers in Genesis folk don't do that math on the reproduction side, and this is why all the artwork they're showing all the, they don't show any domesticated animals walking into the ark. It's all wild animals, like as if there were no cows at the time. No sheep, no goats, and you'll never see sets of sheep and goats in sets of 7, pairs of 7. It's always 2 by 2 by 2 by 2, and this isn't even a Hebrew thing. This is just like a basic English Bible literacy problem. But
without going down that rabbit hole or that breadcrumb trail or whatever, I mean, you and I know the reason being is that they don't want to address the fact that there were clean and unclean animals before Sinai, and so
right.
And that's the big issue, right? That's what they don't want you to see. And they actually have a pair of giraffes going into the ark. When I was out there, and of course they don't show the error that there should have been 14 of them going in, but they only show 2 because they don't want you to notice that they are clean animals.
You betcha.
King Og's bed, Solomon's temple, Solomon's palace, the altar to Solomon's temple, the rooms in Ezekiel's prophetic temple, and the courtyard to that same temple.
Okay, so in Genesis, so if this is his argument that every place where we find orech and rochav together, that must mean a rectangle. I think it's funny he's casually missing Let's see, where is that? I got my slides again. There we go. We're missing Genesis 13:17. Abraham was told, "Arise, walk through the land in the length and the breadth of it, in the length of it and the breadth of it, for I will give it to thee." And so here we have Orech and Rochav here, right? And yes, the same strong numbers matched up. If that helps everyone there. If anyone's ever walked around in Israel, it's not real straight. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but not really. This is a chord. Okay, a tangent is outside of a circle. Let's see here. So I got a round thing. So a tangent is on the outside. A chord is what intersects a circle. And so you have something similar on a sphere, right? So if Abraham was walking in, sometimes they'll make countries' borders, seem to be straight lines, but these straight lines, are, if you're assuming a globe layout, well, now he's going to need to be trenching into the earth as he's cutting into that, or he's going to have to be making bridges in order to rise on top of it, kind of like a disco ball. It's got all these flat little facets, right? Because if the land has got this curvature, then he's got to carve into that in order to satisfy what a rectangle is. A rectangle is not bent. We've got this idea that a rectangle, it just has to have right angle corners. Well, that's not the entire definition of a rectangle. It's got to be made from straight lines. So we have a rectangular, bent section. I don't know what that's, I guess, referred to. I'd have to see. But that's not the definition of a rectangle, because a rectangle is a 2D planar object here. So Abraham not walking on tunnels or bridges. When I lived in Israel, you're walking uphill and downhill and uphill and downhill. This is where I used to live near. We got the old city. Are Israel's roads straight? So one of these words for road, rechov. Okay, and so here's Navaim, the street of the prophets. Is that straight? Rechov Hanavaim. We got Rechov Shiftei Israel. So Shiftei Israel, I used to live down here, but these are not straight roads. Here's the road from in Old City in Jerusalem. They got the Jaffa Gate, the Yaffo, and Yaffo Road also, but Rechov Yaffo. And so this Jaffa Road, was as I understand, it used to run all the way to Tel Aviv. So if you're driving up to Jerusalem, you're on all these switchbacks. And so what does this word have to do? It has to do with the idea of width, widening. So all roads start out as narrow, rabbit trail, upgrade to deer trail, upgrade to people trail, upgrade to two directional, upgrade. Things get wider and wider and wider. And so this is why the word rachov is used in ancient times as well as present times to be describing roads. It's not because they're infinitely straight and part of a rectangle. Because here, if we've got the length of a road and the width of the road, he's demanding it to be a rectangle. So we've also got a crown in the road, right? And that crown, there's a head on that crown, and so you're measuring again from the head of it to the width to the outer outskirt of it. So
I did not know that about you. I'm learning something new about you, Andrew. I did not know you lived in right outside Jerusalem for a time.
Oh yeah. So I was doing the Hebrew study there. So anyway, we've got the idea of Zechariah's scroll. Here's another omission of fact. So here we got from Zechariah 5:2, and he said unto me, "What seest thou?" And I answered, "I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits." Okay, so we got the word for roll. So what are we talking about? Is this the unrolled scroll? Because unrolled scroll would probably be a whole lot longer, but is it that wide? This is this scroll shape. It doesn't conform to what a rectangle expectation is again. And here you have Megillah, which is from Gal, and Gal he gets into Agul a little bit later here. So this is kind of where he's at with things. It's like they're playing Mad Libs in reverse. You ever play Mad Libs as kids? You insert all sorts of funny sayings, and because this is so it's teaching kids parts of speech. Because the Israelites kept worshiping rectangles, snakes, whatever. You're substituting nouns and verbs, and you can do that and still make a sentence coherent, but you're just not allowed to define words this way. This is not how you go about making sensible language. You have to start with definitions, and context confirms, but it's not to be extracted from here and then used as a definition, because especially in the translation game, I guess. So let's see.
I was still reading it, and something about Noel arrived and convinced him about rounding.
I made you so that was supposed to be Nehemiah, because they're trying to teach kids Bible stories, but so I put you in as the as the governor. So you're the governor.
I'm glad I made sure that they had bricks to protect themselves. That's that's good. So
well, I was thinking of the riots the Summer of Love a few years ago. So
yeah. If the bad guys come, I'm going to teach them as their governor that pick up bricks and throw it off the wall.
You bet. Instead of throwing stones, you throw bricks, right?
That's right.
Because they're easier.
I learned that from Home Alone too.
They're easier to drop off in pallets at street corners. If people are, say, interested in rioting, but that's crazy talk, I suppose. But okay, so let's see here. All right, 32. So
in every case, these words are used to describe the dimensions of a rectangle, and in no case are they used to describe a circle. It stands to reason that these Hebrew words are also describing a rectangle when they're used to describe the length and width of the tabernacle courtyard. However, there's still more we can say. There are, in fact, Hebrew words that are consistently used to describe circles. The Hebrew word agol means round. It is used, for example, to describe some of the pedestals that held the water baths in Solomon's temple. 1 Kings 7, verse 31. Its opening was within a crown that projected upward 1 cubit. Its opening was round, agol, as a pedestal is made, 1.5 cubits deep. At its opening, there were carvings, and its panels were square, not round. We can see that this term round is clearly contrasted with square. So Hebrew has a word to describe round things. Hebrew also has a word for circumference, sovav, which we see describing the circular basin in Solomon's temple. 1 Kings 7, verse 23. Then he made the sea of cast metal. It was round, 10 cubits from brim to brim, and 5 cubits high, and a line of 30 cubits measured its circumference, sovav. These words, agol and sovav, are consistently used to describe round objects and curved paths throughout the scriptures.
Okay, I'm back on the presentation on that. I'm going to just skip over this, the idea of orek and time. I was getting that, but here we've got agol and saviv or savav that he's bringing up, and he's bringing up from the ESV. And right now, I'm going to call that the extra sloppy version because it is sloppy in here, and you'll see. If we take a look at this in the Hebrew, and this is again a great irony because he's saying agol is he's bringing that up from 1 Kings 7:30 or so, and this is 1 Kings 7:23. So he could have stayed all in one verse and brought up both of these occurrences. But if you see my color coding here, I've got agol, which is agol with the idea of round and round. So we've also got saviv here and saviv here. They've got 2 out of 4 words for round because we have agol, saviv, and yesov. Okay, so yesov is the thing that he's actually referencing here because he's spelling out sovav, and so I'm inferring that he's dealing with the root again, the verbal root, which is more the action based thing. But the ESV is citing it's missing two of them. So he's saying, well, okay, it can mean circumference. So this blue one here, this idea of compass, a compass in a verb, compass it round about, right? Surrounding and roundabout. And you see these words round or roundabout a lot in the Bible. And here he's saying, well, saviv is circumference. And he's given a bunch of cases where it's like, oh, look, this is where you can use them. There's the concept. We do find pi in Solomon's Laver. A lot of people think this is a case where, okay, it disproves the Bible because the circumference was 30 and the inner the inner diameter was the inner diameter 10 or the outer diameter 10. But if you look at that and say, well, we're going to account for the ID instead of the OD, you end up actually having a number that is almost spot on with pi again. So here, it's just ironic because they're missing the point that the tabernacle is dimension to pi. Solomon's Laver here in this example he's bringing up is connecting it to pi. And we've also got a misspelling in the exact same verse between kav and kava, kind of feminine and masculine forms. And if you look at the ratio of that in the gematria, you also again have pi. And so we're missing a lot of this stuff that's kind of beneath the text. So we've got these two words that he's listed, but he's not bringing up Chag or Chagag, right? This idea of let's have this feast, this circular feast. That's kind of an oops. So let's see. On these omissions now, on the Savav and Saviv, here he's got this really, really short list listed. So if you look at the other form of Saviv, let's see, which is, it's spelled out, okay, on this slide here, you see Saviv and Saviv. He's missing both of these. They're both shown in yellow. Here it's measured its circumference, and so he's talking about a noun here. So that would actually be H5439. So he's getting them confused again between 37 and 39. So there are other terms as well that are, like the word for ring. The word for ring is in the tabernacle case as well. But if you take a look at the Savav and Saviv thing, this is what we see. So he's bringing up, Solomon's temple, Ezekiel's temple, and the tabernacle as the proof text and case in point. And this is where he's skipping, all these references in Ezekiel using Savavs or Saviv, right? And because he's just thinking in terms of Savav. So what he says is, this is just the uttermost fabrication. This is the most damning evidence that he's got here. I'll just play it.
What's important for our purposes is that neither of these words are used in the description of the tabernacle.
Did you hear that? He said neither of these words. That's because, again, he can't tell the difference between Savav and Saviv. Because he's not reading the actual text that's kind of at the baseline of that, and he's not doing the word searches on that. Where am I here? So this is Exodus 27:17. All the pillars round about the court shall be filleted with silver, etc. This idea of Saviv being encompassing or encircling. So you could say, that if you want to pretend that Saviv means circumference, okay. But the idea that it means encircling is really the powerful concept. So he's basically saying that this Saviv word does not exist in the context of the tabernacle. And it's like, sorry, you're desperately mistaken. Not only is it applied here, but it's applied to some of those other things that he was bringing up. So he's overlooking that. So here allegedly understands the word for saviv, for savav, but then is saying it doesn't occur anywhere in Exodus. And again, this is where it's all occurring between Exodus, and I just streamlined this so it was instead of Exodus, and so this is why I'm underslept and trying to get all this stuff documented to show people, say, hey, look at this. We've got all these references. So here we got none in Exodus, and it's mentioned in Kings and Ezekiel, but here we've got it mentioned in Exodus many, many times. Okay, with tabernacle things. So he cannot just say, because I'm wearing my matching polo and I'm part of a team that we're right, and I'm gonna just replay that section there because it's the claim is so ludicrous. Again, this is his small a collection of citations there
throughout the scriptures. What's important for our purposes is that neither of these words are used in the description of the tabernacle. In other words, God could have simply and easily said that the tabernacle and its courtyard were circles by using these Hebrew words.
Yeah, he didn't say they're circles, but he said arrange these posts clockwise and have them revolving about. Okay, so if he wants to see the word circle, if he's mad that the word chug or chag didn't make it, or chagag into the tabernacle, which he doesn't even bring up. Whoops. There you go. This is he's testifying with his own mouth that this is his expectation, is the use of sabab here. So,
for example, he could have said that the tabernacle courtyard was round, 100 cubits from edge to edge,
which it says,
like he says in 1 Kings, describing the round metal sea. But he didn't.
But he did.
Instead, he used the words orech and rochav.
In addition, he used the words orech and rochav. It's not as a substitute. It's in addition to. Okay, so these ideas are not mutually exclusive. So this is what he's trying to sell, this idea that you can only use the one word. You could never really measure a circle, using the word arech, and that's silly. Oops. Okay. So if we look at Saviv in Paleo Hebrew, we've got the Samek, the Bet, the Yud, and the Bet. And so a Samek is a tack or a circle. A Bet is referring to a tent floor plan, which again, these things are specified in halves. And the Bet shows that as an open thing. The arm is arguably a hand or reaching action. We have the Samek being a circular letter. In this font, it's a little less circular. It looks a little more like a mem or mem sofit. So people get that confused when they're learning Hebrew. But so we got the Samek being a circle, but also being a tack. And it's like, well, why is it a tack and a circle? Because when you put an attack and you draw a line around it with a compass, right? And you've got the Bet and the Bet, two half houses that are coming together through this arm, this extension, this reach of the two floor plans. So even the word Saviv, the same way that Rochav seemed to speak to width on the tabernacle, Saviv surely is making allusion to the two half circles being brought together. So I'm not the only person that's made this Saviv thing. There's a guy 100 years ago plus, name is Sully. He was a Christadelphian or something like that, kind of a niche Christian denomination. He had very elaborate plans saying that the wall around it, because he kept seeing in Ezekiel, Savav, 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 Savav. He's like, oh, I'm going to take this literally. So he's got some really amazing research on this. I don't agree with all of his other exegesis things, because I've tried to study his work a little bit, but as far as the amount of time and I have very different opinions on a few of the items. But it's ironic because he didn't understand that the tabernacle was using Saviv in this exact same way. He thought it was an allusion to the future Ezekiel temple. So this is overlaid on the basically the old city. You know, he's got like topographical type drawings shown here. This is done. You know, this is some really meticulous work. So it's not like this thing is so completely fringe as he's like, well, there's no one else who's ever thought this, that Saviv is meaning a round wall. And it's like, yes. Oh, yes, my friend. We got the difference between the Cartesian and the polar coordinate system. So, both of them can express the same thing. This line is the same as this line as far as the units. You can see it's 1, 2, 3 over here, and we've got 1, 2, 3. And so, or the circle is 3 units, and this is 3 units on the Cartesian system. So Cartesian is dealing with an X, Y, and Z. You'd measure a refrigerator with this, but you'd measure a pizza with the polar, So, so that's the difference on that. So, I stumbled upon this proverb. It's kind of funny. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, if only a shape in your mental toolbox is a rectangle, well, then surely everything is rectangular, right? Here we've got the wrench. Wrench is going to have its jaw width. It's going to have a length, and you are going to also rotate it. There's your Saviv, but a hammer is never a wrench, hopefully. Let's see here, back to, I got to just start kind of winding up here, but they're winding down. But
always used to describe rectangles.
Not true.
So the reason that every English Bible translator has consistently depicted the tabernacle as a rectangle is not because of blind adherence to tradition, but it's because the Hebrew in Exodus says that the tabernacle
it's confirmation bias.
Translators are human, and they do sometimes get things wrong. But most of the time, they're honest, and they do their due diligence.
So he's trying to appeal to people's emotions and say, "Oh, give these guys some break, give them some slack." And it's like, well, I'm not trying to lynch all the translators, because it's not all bad in all those spots. Translators are not, they're not engineers, and engineers are usually not translators. And I'm not, master. I don't know everything Hebrew, but I know how to read it, and I know what to, how to study it, and I know how to, relate these ideas to, that which is physical in the physical world. So let me just play on here.
To depict the tabernacle as a rectangle in Exodus. There are 2 more points that we want to briefly cover. One is the proponents of the circular tabernacle theory have built models showing how it's possible to arrange the tabernacle components to form a circular structure. We would like to point out that this doesn't prove anything about how the tabernacle was actually put together.
And that's not true either, because on the flip side, they don't have a working model. He believes they have working models just because he sees them built, but he hasn't studied any of these models. I shouldn't say he hasn't studied them, but he hasn't looked at them critically enough to really critique them with this level of detail. And it shows in his 11-part series that I watched, but it also shows in this video of how how shallow he's digging in really shallow sand. And it sounds easy, it sounds right, it sounds good, but so he's making this claim again that rectangle that they're always translating. I have to kind of speed things through here, I think, but we've got a round and circular. Look at the number of a round. We got 600 of those. Circular and circle, 6 and 17, and another round of 17. So he's saying that, you could arrange it the rectangular way, which he's not trying to support. He's using Timnah here. So Timnah is in Israel, and they've got a model that's built up here. But they're inverting everything on its head. These bases, as I recall, they're made of wood, and they should be made of metal. These bars here, that they should be made of wood, and they make these of metal. On the flip side here, we've got these galvanized posts that are going up to the side to hold this thing together. And it's because the original structure has no stability that they have to add all these cheater poles in there. We've got the let me go back and play as I want to get it, at least it's almost
Raw
done.
materials can be arranged in any number of configurations.
That's not entirely true, because there are limited arrangements and limited quantities. He's talking about raw materials, but there are limited quantities, and we're trying to match limited quantities with descriptions. And this is what works with on the dome, and it doesn't work on the box.
Think about how many different shapes of houses can be constructed out of the same quantities of concrete, lumber, and plywood. Furthermore, scale models of rectangular tabernacles have also been constructed.
Incorrectly.
So it's not as if the circular model is the only practical way to arrange the material.
It's the only conforming way.
In the end, what matters is the blueprint, the instructions for how to put the pieces together. That blueprint is found in Exodus, and Exodus clearly describes a rectangle.
So yeah, I started counting up all the times that he was making reference to rectangle. He's saying rectangle 2-to-1. He says rectangular like 40 times in his whole spiel. When again, we're looking at a three-dimensional box, a cuboid. I'll play his last remark here, because
the second point is, the proponents of the circular model theory have mockingly referred to the rectangular tabernacle in various ways, calling it a crude shack or a shoebox. These criticisms, however, are entirely meaningless because they're based on a person's aesthetic preferences, not on the scriptures. We could just as easily refer to the circular model as a circus tent or a turtle shell.
And that would be kind of fitting if you think about it, because turtles are very, they're mobile and they're divine. And as far as their makeup, they're and they are dome-like. And the same thing with the circus. You've got people coming in to see events and all that.
When I saw that, I thought it was really, really interesting that he didn't mention a yurt tent.
Yeah, and even the word yurt is from ger. Ger in Hebrew is sojourner, and so it's kind of another proof of origin with respect to where this idea of round tents come from. So he's saying I'm doing this mockingly. Well, we've got the Pharisaic challenge of like, well, you guys would strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Tell me that's not mockery. You got Elijah's saying, well, maybe their God is sleeping, so, well, maybe your God lives in a shoebox, and ironically, when you type in rectangular prism, what comes up? Shoeboxes. I would say it's a refrigerator, but those are usually upright vertical, so it's hard for people to relate to. As for for turtles, even the box turtle is round and dome-like, circular. He brings up this idea of crude shack. Well, what is crude? Crude is constructed in a rudimentary or makeshift way, well, relating to an immature, undeveloped, or basic form. And that's what a rectangle is. It's a very basic form. It's underdeveloped. It doesn't have any stability. It is a house of cards. You're standing on a house of cards, my friend. So I went through all of his things to say, well, how many times does he say that? The fact that every Bible translation says that the tabernacle was a rectangle. Well, that's been proven false, because it doesn't show rectangle. The word searches show that. We have it sure sounds like this is describing a rectangle with 4 sides. Well, that's the problem, right? So sounds like is arbitrary. So I'm saying, well, that's not false, but we don't have the makings of a rectangle. We have the context of the tabernacle. These words are always used to describe the length and width of the rectangle. Again, this is disproven. He's disproven it himself. If you go back to timestamp of 13 minutes here, we've got Saviv, Agul, and Savav. The First Kings reference, this is like a major, connection point that he basically says, this is his expectation. And so it's just again and again and again, making these statements. A number of times he makes like 13, 14 claims saying that the Hebrew Exodus, the Hebrew in Exodus says the tabernacle was a rectangle. No, it doesn't. The translators, were right to depict the tabernacle as a rectangle in Exodus. Well, depiction is an artistic thing. So this is they're not drawing it except for the artists depict it, right? They draw it off of a translation. So the translators, we've got some bad hermeneutics in there, and the bad hermeneutics, they come from a preconceived notion. And so this is what they're pumping out. So the Hebrew words used for length and width always describe a rectangle, proven false, again, based on, I bring up that Genesis thing and Zechariah's scroll. So it's just, lots and lots of falsehoods kind of thrown in there. So, I definitely missed the mark here on cleanness and continuity. I do have some more, notes on all these kind of broken shapes, but I was trying to process so much volume, so much content, because he says so much that's untrue and shows so much that's untrue, that it's like, okay, everyone can just take that for granted and take that for granted, whatever. So this is a real, this confirmation bias. It's so rooted in ignorance, and nobody's paying that much attention to the text. So this model, by the way, this 3D CGI model, which he cribbed off of another guy named what's his name, Jeremy. This is Jeremy's model, which he didn't do any citations on it for copyright or whatever. I mean, this is a free to use. He releases, the guy who runs a website called Bible Scenes, but I wrote him back in 2023. And I said, your CGI is amazing. Here's Project 314. But then I didn't get back to him after he was questioning it. So I sent him a link to my book, a chapter intro and everything. And he looks back. This is very interesting. So I get to writing with him, and let me just read what he says. He says, hi, Andrew. I have worked with many Christian producers over the years and seen many holes in so much of what has been represented. I have even politely asked questions and have mostly been met with abruptness or simply fobbed off with an excuse when the question couldn't be answered. On one occasion, even direct anger. I understand that a lot of people build ministries and then may find out along the line that what they thought was true turned out to be not, or vice versa, at which point they have too much to risk by changing their minds. I've been a Christian now for almost 40 years, and in that time I've had my mind changed many times. I expect it to be changed again, probably many times before the Lord, and before I meet the Lord, and then again when I meet Him. I am happy for you to use any of my work in whatever manner. He says you can use my name, and even mentioned that I did indeed struggle with certain aspects of the construction. So here he is saying point blank, I had problems putting this thing together, and but I'm open to hearing a different different take on things. These things are hard to getting into the modeling. You got to be getting every exact part. So you start looking at the text differently. So here's the creator of this box, basically saying, well, yeah, there's some problems I came across, and if 119 did their due diligence, maybe they would have talked to Jeremy and said, hey, did you see anything funny? Did you have problems along the way and setting all this up and representing it? I didn't make like proactive attacks on Jeremy's work because, it's like, well, there's so much of this that's going around. So I've been trying to bring this up with kind of kid gloves in certain ways, but with where 119 was at here with the with this being just an attack and more so, it's basically saying, oh, you want to steer away from these people because they'll give everyone wrong idea and say that the Bible can't be trusted. No, these translations can't be trusted, and a lot of theologians unfortunately can't either. So from this I say make your decision, but I just don't want to keep on going on too long here, Noel, because it's it's been long, and I really didn't have any time to rehearse this or pare it down because there's so much content. And it was my intent to get 119 questions out, so I failed at that. But I have them all recorded. If people want to read my questions, maybe I'll trim all the fat out of them, and I'll maybe post them, because I think these are questions that 119 owes their audience. So
You should. I mean, but 119 questions, that would be one question per minute in the last 2 hours. That'd be a lot of questions to go through. But I will say this, since we're at the end of it, and I purposely was kind of keeping quiet because I knew you had so much to get through, and I wanted you to get all your points out. I was talking about the elephant in the room. And when we were, a lot of commenters already have been pointing this out. Now, when we were talking a couple weeks ago, when I let you know that they dropped that video, we were talking on the phone. I said at that time that I've been married for almost a quarter of a century, and in that, in a quarter of a century, you start to kind of notice some things. And I said that there's been many times where my wife and I will get into an argument, and it's nasty things that happen in marriage. They happen every 3 to 6 months or whatever. You get in this. You're just not getting along, and you get like 2 or 3 hours into it, and then all of a sudden you realize, are we arguing about what the issue really is? And you start to realize that actually there's this underlying current that's actually not even being addressed. And with this, it's Hebrew cosmology, and the fact of the matter is that I don't think it's a secret. I mean, I think that and I don't want to throw out any accusations, but it seems like 119 Ministries is very anti-biblical cosmology. And I almost would like them to maybe see them just like, okay, instead of being passive aggressive towards the issue, let's have you come out a video as to why your interpretation is correct, and that we live on a globe, a spinning, wobbling globe, through the Copernican universe versus under a solid firmament, so on and so forth. And I think that that's a lot of the agitation on their end there. What's driving this, and that's why I said this whole thing was like dripping with irony. Particularly, I really loved it when they were showing the table of showbread. There was like these big ball or whatever, and like all the bread was falling off. And I would just anyways, there were just, when you if you go through and you watch that video from that perspective and go, oh, here's another thing. They said in the very beginning that that the reliability of Scripture would be in question. And that the credibility, can we even define sin at this point? I'm telling you right now that subconsciously on their mind, the flat earth was there, because I have been told this by the globe people so many times, especially like 10 years ago. The whole crowd, they're saying, well, if you can't properly understand, that we live on a spinning, wobbling globe and gravity and satellites and all this kind of stuff, if you can't see that in the Bible like we can, then we're not going to believe anything else you say about the Bible, because your whole credibility is out the window. And it's just kind of funny because their own judgment, they're kind of like, it's like, well, you can turn that question around. Like, let's say you guys are wrong by your own, critique of this situation. Can you be trusted with anything else as well if you are wrong about this issue? But anyways, I digress. Just want to throw that out there. That's what I saw as the elephant in the room in this whole thing. And I think that what they're probably they're kind of taking it out on you. And I think it's easier for them to throw your research out because, like you said, you've got this huge ratio where you've got, so many subscribers. I didn't see how many you had. Like it was, a small compared to theirs. And so they know that they can just like this rebuttal, 99% of their audience is not even going to bother to look, right? They're not going to even bother to look at this, so they can throw yours out. And that's kind of how they deal with the whole biblical cosmology thing. I think that's my assessment of the situation. Any thoughts on that, Andrew?
Well, yeah, there's a mixture of bullying and there's a mixture of kind of the insecurity thing. Now, what's interesting is you start looking at the comments, and I started studying this. So like, okay, they got 335 thumbs up, so those are people who have 20 minutes or less to learn their theology for the week. And then we got 31 thumbs down. Okay, so I do have some groupies. They're hanging out, and they're engaging. And when I say engaging, let me bring open the if I'm sorting here by newest first. Okay, we got a couple of real recent ones I haven't seen yet. But the one that was standing for a few days was Joel's here. That dissident view also pushes flat Earth, and so it's like, well, I didn't say anything about cosmology, and what happens all the time is like, because I am talking about the dome, it's like, well, you're just saying that because and so they'll bring up the FE people in the crowd and everything. It's like, well, I say that I've said this to Zen's audience, like, well, think of it this way. A planetarium, you see planetariums, they make those as domes. They don't make them as full spheres. They make them as domes, and you go inside of them and you look and you see the heavens. And, so you have the book of Hebrews. It talks about how this is a pattern of what's seen in heaven. And it's like, well, when's the last time you saw a picture of heaven that's depicted that looks like that shoebox thing, right? You never see that. And there's a good reason for it. It's because it doesn't work. It's not what the text is talking about, and it's functionally retarded. Okay. And so, they don't think of heaven in that way. So that's one point. But if you look at all these comments, you have a battle. And it's not so much cosmology, because a lot of people are just saying, well, the book is on, you're misrepresenting. And before I had the top comments, and I kind of scrolled down, and what was interesting before, it was coming up, it was all Pro 119, but I went and looked. They can have the numbers on the overall video, but I also tallied up all the positive comments for the 314 for the dome. I'm outpacing them 2-1, and that is one of these. I'll bring up my Gandhi slide here. Let me see now. Is that up? Oh, why is that not up from current slide? There we go. So. Oh, why is this not working? I don't know. I'm going to just bring it in here. So this is the progression of thought with truth and all that. I got another one of him down somewhere else. But this idea, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So people say that's Gandhi. Apparently it's not. But there's a guy named Nicholas Klein, who is a union activist, who said almost the same thing. They ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they attack you and want to burn you, and then they build monuments to you. I don't want anyone building monuments, but getting into this progression, we're at a really interesting turning point here, and I'm actually very encouraged by their attack, because it means that the grassroots is growing, and the grassroots movement of that. We're approaching this point in this diffusion of innovation. We're looking at where this is a bell-shaped curve over the course of time as far as people accepting new things, right? So there's the innovators, the early adopters, and then there's a chasm between that and the early majority. And so this is what we're at. This is what we're approaching. This is what the comments speak to as far as the quantities. Rose Guide to the Tabernacle, that's the most famous resource for the shoebox models. This is they're getting an average of 38 reviews per year. I'm getting 8. Okay, I'm at 56 ratings. They're at but they were also released back in 2008, right? And so if you start to look at that, what this means in numbers is that we are right here. We are at the point of ignoring has really kind of come to an end, and there's been some mocking along the way, and I think this video is indirectly mocking or trying to undermine. So we got from ignore to undermine and then fight. So I think this is an early fight or a mid-grade mock, because a lot of people have just dismissed this and said, that's dumb. And it's because they don't understand. But as more people read the book, you start seeing all this stuff of like, oh, I read the book. It's like they didn't test anything. They didn't factor this in. We've got 4.5 stars plus 4.7. So are all the customers who are buying this book saying, "Oh, what an idiot! How wrong could that be?" It's completely baseless. It's like, that book is 200 some pages. I have heaps of Tabernacle books here. I got some of these in Israel that you can't even get. You cannot get here in the States. This is one is actually goes through all this thoroughly, but they all do the same thing. They draw the same box, and they make the frame arrangements the same, and they don't really care about how any of it fits together, works engineering. This what's on the screen now, this piece here, they just add that in because it's like, well, it should be there because we need something to keep the sides from collapsing, and so we'll just add it in. Nobody will notice. Well, how does it attach to the wall? Well, I don't know if it attaches to the wall. Didn't say anything. Well, we'll attach it to the wall. What about the lateral direction this way? Well, what about the fact that now you can't even walk in and you sneak by here? What about the fact that this guy's got the poles drawn on the bottom? Whereas the other model that they had, they show it up top. Oh, that's it. Just details, doesn't matter. It's like, oh, spare us this detail. It frightens me. So there's people are terrified. And the 119 crew, I think, is no exception because it's like, well, we don't have control of the narrative anymore. All these people who are these peons that we've been blowing off for a long time, they're growing in number, and the peasants are coming out with the torches and the pitchforks. And I think that's what fills them with fear, and that's what compels them to make a hit piece like this. And again, it's like they're fishing for goldfish in a goldfish bowl, in a small pond, and trying to be that big fisherman that's capable of scooping them all out and moving around the way he wants. And the time for that system is nearing its end. If you look at all the comments, go and read all the comments on this on their video. And I actually shared their video. It's like, do you think they're going to share this one? I doubt it. So it's
yeah, that was the one thing that was agitating for me, was the fact that they felt like they could just get away with it, right? Because they have all these subscribers, no one's going to check, they're just going to take their word for it, move on. And that's kind of what really frustrated me about the whole thing. So I hope that people do see this video, and I hope this gets shared with some of the people in their audience, and they could fact check it and they could see for themselves. And I was telling you, Andrew, like when we were off camera, that like I wouldn't want to argue math with you. And I felt like they kind of like brought a gun to it. I'm sorry, I messed that up. Like a knife to a gunfight, pretty much. But they just didn't want anyone in their audience to notice.
Well, it's both the math and the language. Their use of language is worse than their use of math, and that should terrify, and that should fill their audience with pause. I stopped. Frankly, we have some overlapping, viewpoints, whether it's, feast observance and kosher and this and that, dispensationalism. And I'm happy to say that we share a number of those viewpoints, but to have this now a departure, it's like, okay, well, you have to, that's why there's so many people, because they have so much content. There's so many people who like their content and are on this one, are like, oh, okay, time out. I've seen some other people saying I'm unsubscribing because of this, and I think that this whole thing, you say knife to a gunfight, but this is something that it shouldn't have been a fight to begin with, and it's they've come to make it a fight because they're digging their heels in, and whether or not the root of that is cosmology, I think it's a bigger thing. I think it's that people are terrified to think that they've had that wrong for this long, and there's that many people who have been this wrong and that long. And so some people say, oh, rest assured, it's not a salvation issue. And it's like, says who? Says what? I'm not saying it is, I'm saying that, their idea of salvation, I asked this question. So what if your idea of salvation is distorted as your view of the tabernacle? It's like, oh boy, that's terrifying as a thought like that. That's terrifying, people. And I'm not trying to, well, it does say in the New Testament, right? Work out your faith with fear and trembling, right? Be a Berean, search all these things, test these things, is a Timothy phrase. But, really, I think it terrifies people to say, I can't trust my English Bible anymore. What can I trust? And this is where I encourage people to learn Hebrew. Look at Ark, right? Orek. Look how much of that's used in English. This idea of Edenics. This is a nice, crutch to help people, absorb a lot of Hebrew vocabulary. Soffit. Well, what do we have in Hebrew? We have soft. We have a threshold. We have, there's just so many things. And then you guys are getting into the paleo. You see, I've got dozens upon dozens upon dozens of paleo examples of this. It's like, well, see how this fits here into that, and orthodoxy, whether it's Christian, Messianic, Jewish, they're kind of like, oh, the jury's still out on the paleo, and it's like, well, a lot of people think it's pretty neat, and other people say it's inconclusive or it's concocted or whatever. But it's like once you start to study it and stare at this, it's like, well, this goes hand in glove with so much tabernacle stuff. Your opening here started with Breshit, right? We have the Bet and then the Resh and then the Aleph and the Shin. So the first 4 letters of the Bible are tent, head, okay? Or the first 2 letters of the Bible, Bet and Resh, tent and head. It's like, well, this is exactly what we've got going here. This is tent head. This is the head. This tent. It's and so. Yeah, there's the cosmological aspects, there's the zodiac aspects, there's the anatomical aspects, there's the practical setup, tear down, the logistical side, the engineering aspects, the revelation aspects, the prophetic side. I've got an article on my website talking about how the courtyard is 144, or I'm sorry, it's 44 posts. Well, you also it talks about Exodus 38 was 100 pieces of silver. And then there's 1775 pieces of silver, small pieces of silver, like shekels, that are used to make the rest of all these, what do you call it? It's these, all these hooks on the top. When I say hooks, they're T's actually. And when I say they're T's, if you look, they got collars here, all these silver collars. Well, did they do the math and say, how much silver do we have as far as the volume of that silver? The amount of silver that you're given for the courtyard, it's like the equivalent of an iPhone, like one iPhone. Oh, by the way, these wood posts, these aren't supposed to be wood. They're supposed to be copper. Exodus 27, 9 through 15, what have you, is talking about these, and it's make them out of copper. And so they never have permission to use wood, so they make them out of wood. Well, nobody cares. That doesn't matter because it's a rectangle, right? This is where we go with this. At some point it becomes a mental illness where people cannot even read the Bible to the point of that's English. In English it says they're made of copper. It's not like I'm saying, oh, they should have translated this word as copper instead of wood. No, you won't find the word wood in that whole thing. So these people are going into this with so much image, so much bias, so much confirmation bias that they can't see clearly. And again, they're terrified to hear this message, is saying, hey, you guys got a lot of wrong stuff. If you don't go back to base text, don't think for a moment you got enough to stand and argue on, because you don't. That's unfortunate. But this is the culture and time we're raised in. So how do you respond? Say, well, I think I'll respond by ostriching. More head in the sand. It's like, how's that working out for you? Because right now you want to talk about something that is unglorifying of the Almighty. It is this shoebox. This I said, okay, we'll call it a shipping container if it makes them feel better, because it's proportioned like a shipping container too, or a Winnebago. Although Winnebagos come in different sizes and shapes. But
I have one question for you. There's been a couple comments that have kind of passed through here talking about New Jerusalem, and I'm kind of curious if you have any thoughts on that. Is that a cube shaped or pyramid shaped, or could it have some round elements to it?
Yeah. So
I don't need to go off on that. I'm just kind of curious if you have any quick thought on that.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up, and then this gets into the primacy of all this language, because what he brought up earlier was this word, he was quoting stuff on the furnishings, including the altar of the burnt altar. Now I do like a hour and a half teaching on one of my webinars that's kind of available by recording. But getting into Rebua, the idea of quartered or forward. So I'm going to bring up that word. You can start to see all that if I'm looking at. Actually, it's easier to go interlinear at this point. Rebua. So this idea where it says foursquare, they'll translate it again and again as foursquare. And it's talking about corners, and people are like, how do you reconcile this with corners, right? So we got the horns of the altar where in English we hear the word horn, and koren having to do with the idea of a horn. Okay. Here we have arba. There's four. There's a place where it says it should be foursquare. There it is. 27:1. And thou shalt make an altar of shittim wood 5 cubits long and 5 cubits broad. The altar should be foursquare. Okay. So that foursquare word, if we go and find Rebua, here she is. I should bring up this in 7251. Or foursquared. This is a little bit slow here. So there we go. Rebua. Okay, so if I go and start looking at all these neighboring entries, not that one. I want to go with this one, I think. There we go. All the neighboring entries. So one of the definitions, square to be or be squared, but we have other ideas that are kind of coupled in the idea of getting in the same spelling. A primitive root rather than 7250, we got Rabah. I'm going to bring in Strong's because I think it's here we got the idea of to lie down. Well, if you know Hebrew numbers, you know that Rabua it's like Arba. We have 3 of the 4 letters of Arba in there. Arba is 4. And so this idea of quartered, okay. So it's referring to like an animal that's on all fours and squatting. I don't have there we go. Sprawling at all fours, okay. Well, sprawling on all fours and being a square are 2 desperately different ideas. I shouldn't say desperately; they're interrelated, but they're unique. And one is, there's if you draw a Venn diagram, you got an overlap between one and the other. But the predominant usages of all this. Here we have prostration for sleep, lying down. Fourth, okay, a fourth part, a side, a square. Okay, a fourth part is a quarter, okay? So I could divide a 25-cent piece in half and in half again. I would have a quartered quarter, okay, get that. But we have quarters in our pockets. We don't have right angles on them, and they are not squares. So this whole concept of what the quarter is really referring to is it's Jerusalem being foursquare. I'm sure it's quartered. I'm positive it's quartered. I'd bet my life on it. But to say that it's square, I would highly doubt that. I have started into study of Solomon's temple, study of Ezekiel's temple, and looking at those revelation dimensions. And what you can't do is assume that you can't just jump into Revelation and without reading Genesis and say I know everything about this book. because it's all knowledge. It's predicated on other knowledge, right? So
Right.
Precept upon precept, you got the same thing going. So
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we close? I usually like to go. We can go as long as you want. Usually I like to keep these around 2 hours. We're like at the 2.5 hour mark. Anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. I guess I'll offer start with apology, because I promised 119 questions. Maybe I do have 119 questions packed in there, but I didn't get all through them. And so, my presentation, there's a lot of content that I was trying to get out in a little time, and I was probably unrealistic, but hopefully the slides helped. And again, my House of El Shaddai book, that's on Amazon. If you want to take the time, and you probably won't get it in time for for the Torah portion study, but this Torah portion, it's recurring. We have it first talks about and they're told to build it this way, and then in Exodus 37 and all that, and they built it this way, right? So you got this. It is going to be repeated again. So 1/25 of the liturgical year is dedicated to the tabernacle. There are 50 chapters in the Bible that make reference to it, and there's other things that people aren't aware of. Like Mount Zion. Well, this whole idea of this is Har. It's a mountain. It's a and I said this to 119. It's like it talks about the pattern that Moses saw. Bahar is the way they translate it is on the mountain, but the bet is in. So it's the idea of in the mountain. Well, in the mountain, what is that? A cave? Oh, well, the bet happens to be a house, and Har happens to be a mountain. So rather than thinking of it, if you think of it in a more paleo construct, letter by letter, it's like mountain house. Make sure you make everything according to the pattern mountain house that I command you. So everyone's like, oh, looking for these lost commandments that are on Mount Sinai that gives us enough for the tabernacle. And it's like, no, we have enough. We just have to know it's the mountain house. So there's all sorts of stuff. And that's, again, 50 chapters at the Mishkan Ohel Moed. Ohel Moed which is basically the tent of meeting, or tent of appointed times. It's mentioned twice as much as the Leviticus 23, the feasts that are described in Leviticus 23. So everyone's arguing always about the feasts, but they don't give a rip about the tabernacle. It's like, well, they didn't observe the feast until they had the tabernacle, like newsflash there. And so, I'm doing, the project is the slogan is research and restoration. So I'm doing research, but I'm also doing restoration. I'm building this. You can get I got a 1/75 scale model kit that's available on my website. I have, again, the book's out, the webinars. I do like a 7-part webinar series on both the tabernacle and some of the other semi-esoteric sides of it. And there's just a lot of depth and dimensions. And it's like it's the idea that you don't know what you don't know, right? So how can you know? People think the tabernacle's importance is non-existent. It's like, well, that's coming from a person who doesn't know anything about the tabernacle. And so they've taught us that the tabernacle is irrelevant because the way they draw it up. They also call it the wilderness tabernacle, when in fact it was established 369 years in Shiloh. They act like, oh, they brought this into the land and they sat around for a little bit, but then they bought it and built a temple. Well, the tabernacle outlasted either temple. It's 480 years after the Exodus. And everyone just forgets about that. Oh, it's just a temporary structure. And it's like, well, when Solomon wanted to build, when David wanted to build, what did he hear? He says, when did I ever ask my people to shepherd my people that I wanted a house of cedar? And people are not on board with that, because everyone's thinking, okay, eschatology, third temple, never mind the reference to the tabernacle, or Mishkani is my tabernacle will be above them in the book of Ezekiel. So it's outside of people's eschatology radars. And, there's a lot of stuff, but the cosmology is the people who are, of biblical cosmology, persuasion, construction, influence, gravitate towards this like nobody's business. And that's fine. But the problem that I have is like saying, like, there's much more to this apart from cosmology, and the people who are excited about the cosmology still aren't really digging into the rest of the story. And so I built a 1/8 scale. I had it exhibited once in Illinois, and I'm presently working in the shop building a 1/6 scale. So, if there are any of those people in the 119 audience who might be interested in help sponsoring that, by all means, I could use some support on that. You saw my numbers; it's 74-1. So we can talk about a knife to a gunfight, but I'm chucking BBs here at a pretty big Sherman tank. So help me out, share, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, because if there's that Field of Dreams movie, right? If you build it, he will come. This whole we people they'll say to me a lot of times, like, oh, I really love your work, and it's kind of like, well, that's great. That helps me. It's encouraging, but the whole idea, like my car runs on gas and not thanks. And so to get people really behind us, so we're building it. The people who make in mega churches, they spend $50 million. Think of a structure being able to build this. They spent $100 million on the Noah's Ark exhibit for a boat that won't float, for a flood that won't happen. And but it seriously it gives people some semblance of reality. It's like, think of if you ever hear the witnesses of those people who walk out of that, they're like, oh, I'm so amazed, I never thought it could really be. It's like that's a value, and think of that if we could do that with the Tabernacle, and that is my vision, is to make a full size, because why not? Like to make it, this 6 scale would be about 30 feet in diameter. I was able to get over 50 people in my 8th scale one, which is smaller. That's 22. But once you go to 30, then that holds about 150 people or so. So be able to show this at feasts. It's a learning tool. And so it's hands-on as hands-on gets. And bringing all the parts of the body together. I could use hand and video editing as well, because I definitely need some better, as far as content creation. I have to measure my time out. It's like either I go and neglect this or I neglect that. And it's like, well, if I'm trying to do everything myself, this isn't going to work. And I have made progress and strides, but again, I got a 1/75th kit where you can build it on your kitchen table. And that's something I recommend, people who are homeschooling and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes, just because I'm not in front of the camera all the time, and, got my polished, my matching polos and stuff. There is stuff going on. I am doing, research and restoration, in ways that people just don't see. And, so hopefully as people are engaging the public more, and engaging their teachers more, everyone's gun shy on this, because they're like, oh, I don't know, I can't prove it myself. Well, you'll share more of this type of content with them. Get educated yourself in the book, because if you don't know anything, that was part of 119's point too. It's like, well, if you don't know anything, what does that say for your witness? Like if you just say, well, it's round because I heard it was, it's like, well, then you run the risk of doing. I would say doing damage, because at least you're arguing on the right side. You can hear a presentation like this. It can trip your discernment. You say, well, that makes a lot of sense. I can't remember it all, but that makes great sense. Or you maybe get 4 walkaway points out of this. And the more people absorb some of these bits and pieces, the more all this is parts of the body coming together. And that's what we need for, getting into the restoration. People want to say, I want to return to the Torah. I want to, it's like, well, this is part of the Torah. This is part of the commandments. And, that our unfamiliarity with it, except for in the 613, they only credit, there's 83 verbs in the Terumas section, and there's only one that's credited to, it said, make me a sanctuary so I can dwell among them. They changed it into a sanctuary from the Mishkan, drop all the Mishkan commandments and say, well, he just meant the temple. It's like, oh, really? Did he? There's no other structure in the Bible. It says, "Thus saith the Lord." Build it this way, for your generations. And I think that at the very least, it should be a monument. It should be a testimony to what our Creator told us to do, and what to showing his mind, on this whole thing. People are saying, "Oh, gee, you're awfully creative," and it's like, well, you could arrange the materials in any way possible, and it's like, no, you can't. And if you start looking at this from a standpoint of irreducible complexity, it's a very fascinating study, and the sizes, the numbers, and then the numerology, the gematria, it all just sings together. All of it does. So, yeah.
All right, Andrew, thank you for coming on, and it was much appreciated. And we'll have to do this more often. But it's too bad that it had to, be what happened for you to come on and give a presentation on your research. But again, it was much appreciated. I hope this was helpful to individuals. And I think we're going to close it there because we could go on like all night. And you're on a roll tonight. So, do you want to give like your? I should just, maybe you could like email me all your website information, all that kind of stuff. I could just kind of paste below this video so people can go check that out if they want to. And and I know you're always looking for help. So if anybody out there would like to help Andrew, get in touch with him and let him know, because he's always looking for that. So, all right. Any last words, Andrew?
Well, thank you. And then thank you. Baruch Hashem, blessed be the name. And the name is, this would be, his house. This is, it's an important thing. And I hope everyone sees it like that or begins to see it appreciate it for what it is. So, it's
all right. Good night, everybody. And thank you for coming by. That's it. Show's over.